The hospital hallway was quiet in the way only night shift corridors ever are. Not peaceful. Just emptied of importance. Lights hummed overhead. Machines breathed softly behind closed doors. Somewhere far away, a call bell rang and then stopped. The world kept moving, but slowly, like it was holding its breath. Marisol pushed her cleaning cart forward, the wheels squeaking faintly against polished tile. She had learned to walk softly. To exist without announcing herself. To pass through places without leaving fingerprints. For 17 years, this hospital had known her only as background. The woman who emptied trash cans. The woman who wiped fingerprints off glass doors. The woman who cleaned up spills and blood and things no one wanted to think about. She worked nights because nights asked fewer questions. During the day, people noticed you. At night, they looked through you. Marisol preferred it that way. Or at least, she had convinced herself she did. As she approached the far end of the obstetrics wing, she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to routine. A scream. Not the sharp cry of sudden pain. Not the controlled breathing of practiced labor. This sound was raw. Torn from deep inside the body. The sound of someone who had been hurting for too long. Marisol slowed her steps. Another scream followed. Weaker this time. Cracked around the edges. Behind a set of double doors, monitors beeped faster. Voices rose and fell. Shoes moved quickly across the floor. Something was wrong. Marisol had heard labor before. Hundreds of times. Thousands, maybe. Pain had patterns. Birth had rhythms. Even chaos followed rules. This was different. She parked her cart near the wall and pretended to clean the baseboards, her movements slow and careful, her ears tuned toward the door. Inside, doctors spoke in clipped tones. Heart rates dropping again. Change her position. Push oxygen. We're running out of time. Marisol's chest tightened. She had heard these words before. Not in this building, not in this country, but in places where help arrived late or not at all. In homes made of concrete and tin. In villages where electricity flickered and clinics were hours away. She pressed the mop head against the floor and listened. The woman inside cried out again, this time hoarse and exhausted, like her body had already given everything it had. How long has she been laboring? Someone asked. 40 hours. Marisol swallowed. 40 hours was not labor anymore. It was a battle. She knew without seeing the monitors that the baby was tired too. Marisol closed her eyes for a brief moment, and memory pulled her backward in time. She was 8 years old the first time her grandmother took her to a birth. It was early morning, the sky barely light, roosters still calling across the fields. Marisol had been half asleep when Abuela shook her gently. Come, her grandmother had said. You need to see. Marisol hadn't understood then. She only knew that when Abuela spoke that way, you followed. They walked for nearly an hour to the neighbor's house. The woman inside was young and afraid, her cries echoing through thin walls. There was no doctor. No nurse. Just Abuela, and now, Marisol. Watch, Abuela had whispered. Feel with your eyes first. Marisol remembered how her grandmother's hands moved. Calm. Certain. Never rushed. Never unsure. Babies tell you what they need, Abuela had said. But you must learn how to listen. That morning, Marisol learned that birth was not something to be forced. It was something to be guided. A loud beep snapped her back to the hospital hallway. Marisol opened her eyes. Inside the delivery room, voices overlapped. Prep the OR. Call anesthesia. We may need to move now. The scream came again, this time fractured, desperate. Marisol felt something shift inside her chest. A pressure she had learned to ignore. A voice she had trained herself to silence. For 17 years, she had been invisible on purpose. Invisible people survive. Invisible people don't get questioned. Invisible people don't get in trouble. Invisible people don't get deported. Invisible people don't lose the little stability they've built. Marisol had crossed a border with nothing but fear and hope sewn into her coat. She had slept on church floors. She had scrubbed toilets to send money home. She had stayed silent when people spoke about birth like it was something she didn't understand. She had accepted that her knowledge no longer had a place. But the scream behind that door would not let her stay quiet. Another doctor spoke, louder now. Tighter. She's exhausted. If we don't intervene, we risk losing both. Marisol's fingers tightened around the mop handle. She didn't need an ultrasound. She didn't need a monitor. She could hear the problem in the way the pain traveled. She could hear it in the rhythm of the cries. She could feel it in her bones. The baby was facing the wrong way. Posterior. Face up. Spine against spine. A hard birth. A dangerous one if mishandled. But not impossible. Not if you knew what to do. Marisol glanced down the hallway. A security guard passed the far intersection, his footsteps fading. Her heart pounded. If she was wrong, she would lose everything. If she was right and did nothing, she would never forgive herself. Her grandmother's voice rose clearly in her mind, as if Abuela were standing beside her. When you know how to help, Mija, staying silent is the same as doing harm. Marisol set the mop down. She smoothed her faded scrubs with trembling hands. Then she walked to the door. Her knock was soft at first. Almost apologetic. No response. Inside, chaos continued. Marisol lifted her hand again. This time, she knocked harder. The door opened a few inches. A nurse appeared, eyes tired, jaw tight, patience thin. Yes, the nurse snapped. Marisol swallowed. I'm sorry, she said carefully, her accent thick in moments of fear. I know I am not supposed to interrupt. But I think I know what is happening with the baby. The nurse stared at her. You're the cleaner. Yes, Marisol said. But before, in my country, I was a midwife. The nurse's expression shifted from irritation to disbelief. Ma'am, we have 12 specialists in here. I know, Marisol said softly. But the baby is posterior. Face up. That is why the pain is in her back. That is why the baby is not coming down. The nurse shook her head. This is not appropriate. Please step away. I can help, Marisol said, urgency breaking through her calm. I can turn the baby without surgery. 5 minutes. The nurse began to close the door. Marisol's heart sank. The door shut. She stood there, staring at the wood grain, the weight of 17 years pressing down on her shoulders. Of course they hadn't listened. Why would they? She picked up her mop. She had tried. That would have to be enough. Then she heard it. A scream, different from the others. Not loud. Terrified. And beneath it, a doctor's voice edged with panic. We're losing fetal heart tones. Marisol stopped walking. Her hands shook. She turned around. And knocked again. Hard. The second knock echoed louder than Marisol expected. Not because she hit the door harder, but because the room behind it had gone suddenly quiet. The door opened wider this time. Inside, everything felt sharper. Brighter. Louder. Machines beeped in uneven rhythms. A large monitor glowed with numbers Marisol didn't need to read to understand. Doctors stood around the bed like pieces on a chessboard, each waiting for someone else to make the next move. On the bed lay the woman. She looked nothing like the elegant photos Marisol had once seen framed in glossy magazines in the hospital lobby. No makeup. No calm smile. Just sweat-soaked hair clinging to her face, lips trembling, eyes sunken with exhaustion. 41 hours had hollowed her out. A tall man stood near the head of the bed, gripping the rails so tightly his knuckles were white. His tailored suit jacket lay folded over a chair, forgotten. Power radiated from him even now, the kind that came from always being listened to. The billionaire husband. Every head turned toward Marisol. A senior doctor stepped forward immediately. "This area is restricted," he said, voice clipped. "You need to leave. Now." Marisol didn't argue. She didn't apologize. She did the one thing she had learned worked better than either. She spoke the truth. "The baby is face up," she said calmly. "Posterior position. That is why her back pain is severe and constant. That is why the baby is not descending." The room froze. A younger resident glanced instinctively at the monitor. Another doctor frowned, checking the ultrasound again. The senior doctor scoffed. "We already know the fetal position." Marisol nodded. "Yes. And you are trying to pull the baby down instead of helping the baby turn." The words landed like a slap. The billionaire stepped closer. "Who are you?" he demanded. Marisol finally looked at him. "I clean this hospital," she said. "But before that, I helped deliver babies for many years." The billionaire laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "This is insane," he said, turning to the doctors. "Why is she even in here?" Before anyone could answer, the woman on the bed spoke. Her voice was barely there. "Wait." Everyone turned. She lifted her head with effort and stared directly at Marisol. What did you say?" she asked. Marisol stepped closer to the bed but stopped short of touching. "The baby is facing the wrong direction," she said gently. "That is why your pain feels like it's breaking your back. If we help the baby turn, your body can do the rest." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "No one told me that," she whispered. The senior doctor intervened quickly. "We are not going to let an unlicensed staff member interfere with a high-risk delivery." Marisol felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "I am not asking to interfere," she said. "I am asking for 5 minutes." "Absolutely not," the doctor snapped. The billionaire nodded in agreement. "This ends now," he said. "Prep the ore." The woman cried out, not from pain this time, but fear. "No," she said weakly. "Please." She reached for her husband's hand. "I can't do surgery," she whispered. "I'm so tired. I just want to try." He hesitated. For the first time since Marisol had entered the room, the billionaire looked uncertain. "How do you know this will work?" he asked her. Marisol met his gaze. "I don't," she said honestly. "But I know what happens if you don't let me try." Silence stretched. A nurse cleared her throat. "The fetal heart rate is stabilizing for the moment," she said quietly. "But not for long." The room held its breath. Finally, the senior doctor exhaled sharply. 5 minutes, he said. "That's all you get. One mistake, and she's out." Marisol nodded. 5 minutes was more than enough. She washed her hands slowly, deliberately, as if grounding herself in the ritual. She felt every year of her life settle into her shoulders, every birth she had witnessed, every scream she had calmed, every moment when knowledge had mattered more than fear. She approached the bed. "May I touch you?" she asked the woman. "Yes," the woman whispered immediately. Marisol placed her hands gently on the woman's belly. She closed her eyes, not to block out the room, but to listen more clearly. She waited for the next contraction. When it came, she didn't push. She guided. Her hands moved in slow, firm motions, encouraging, not forcing. She shifted the woman's position, adjusting hips and shoulders in ways that looked strange to the doctors watching. "What is she doing?" one whispered. Marisol ignored them. She spoke softly to the mother. "Breathe low," she said. "Let your body soften. The baby needs space." Another contraction. She applied pressure, not downward, but sideways, inviting the baby to move. The monitor beeped differently. A nurse leaned closer. Heart rates improving. Marisol felt it then. The subtle change. The moment when resistance gave way. The baby responded. The woman gasped. "Oh, something changed," she said. "It doesn't hurt the same." A doctor checked the ultrasound again. His eyes widened. "The baby is rotating." The senior doctor stepped forward now, unable to hide his shock. That's not supposed to." Marisol continued. One more contraction. One more adjustment. The baby turned fully. The room erupted into movement. Position corrected. Vitals steady. "Prepare for delivery, now." Marisol stepped back. Her 5 minutes were over. She wiped her hands on a towel and retreated to the corner, becoming invisible again by instinct. But this time, no one looked away. Minutes later, a cry filled the room. Strong. Clear. Alive. The baby was born. The billionaire sank into a chair, sobbing openly. Doctors stared at the monitors in disbelief. And Marisol, still standing quietly against the wall, felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Relief. She turned to leave. She had done what she came to do. As her hand touched the door handle, the senior doctor spoke. "Wait." She stopped. He looked at her, not with anger this time, but something closer to awe. "Where did you learn that?" Marisol turned back slowly. "My grandmother," she said. And for the first time in 17 years, the room listened. The cry of the newborn still echoed in the room long after the baby was placed in its mother's arms. It wasn't the loud celebration people imagined birth to be. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that follows shock. Doctors stood frozen where they were, staring at the monitor as if it might suddenly confess what had just happened. Nurses exchanged looks they didn't know how to explain. No one spoke because no one knew which words were safe anymore. The system had worked. And it had failed. At the same time. The billionaire wiped his face with shaking hands and leaned over his wife. She was crying too, not from pain, but release. Her fingers clutched the baby's blanket as if she might disappear if she let go. "You did it," he whispered. "You're okay. The baby's okay." Her eyes drifted toward the corner of the room. Toward Marisol. "She did it," the woman corrected softly. The room shifted. Attention moved like a spotlight, landing fully on the woman who still stood against the wall, hands folded, eyes lowered. Marisol felt exposed. This was the moment she had always avoided, the moment when invisibility vanished. The senior doctor cleared his throat. "We'll need to document exactly what happened here," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "This is highly irregular." Irregular was a gentle word. By morning, it would become dangerous. Marisol knew that. She had seen systems protect themselves before. She slipped out of the room quietly while everyone else was distracted. Down the hallway. Past the nurse's station. Back to her cart. She picked up the mop. Routine was safety. If she returned to normal quickly enough, maybe the world would too. But by sunrise, the hospital was buzzing. Whispers traveled faster than official statements ever could. The cleaner turned the baby. She fixed a stalled labor. They were about to do surgery. By the time Marisol clocked in that night, she could feel eyes following her. A supervisor pulled her aside near the supply closet. "Administration wants to see you," the woman said, voice tight. Marisol's stomach dropped. This was it. She straightened her scrubs and followed. The conference room was cold. Too bright. Designed to make people uncomfortable. 3 administrators sat on one side of the table. The senior doctor from the delivery stood near the window. A legal consultant flipped through a thin folder. Marisol took the chair they gestured toward. "Do you understand why you're here?" one administrator asked. Marisol nodded. "Yes. You intervened in a medical procedure without authorization." "I helped," Marisol said carefully. "You practiced medicine without a license." "I used my hands," she replied. "And my experience." The lawyer leaned forward. "Where exactly did you receive this experience, Ms. Marisol?" She inhaled slowly. "In my village. From my grandmother. From women who delivered babies when doctors were not available." The senior doctor turned from the window. "How many births?" he asked. Marisol thought for a moment. "More than I can count," she said. "I assisted from the time I was a girl until I left my country." Silence followed. An administrator tapped a pen against the table. "You put this hospital at risk," she said. "If something had gone wrong." "But it didn't," another administrator interrupted quietly. Everyone turned. "The patient and child are stable," he continued. "And very grateful." Grateful didn't erase liability. Marisol sat still, hands folded, waiting. She had already decided she would accept whatever came. Suspension. Termination. Deportation. The door opened suddenly. A man in an expensive suit stepped inside. The billionaire. The room stiffened immediately. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said calmly. "But I believe this meeting involves the woman who saved my family." No one spoke. He placed a folder on the table. "I've spoken with my attorneys," he continued. "And with the board." The lawyer's eyes flicked to the folder. "This hospital almost lost 2 lives last night," the billionaire said. "Not because of negligence, but because protocol doesn't account for everything." He looked directly at Marisol. "You trusted your instincts when no one else could help," he said. "That took courage." The administrators shifted uncomfortably. "I won't allow her to be punished for doing what your system couldn't," he continued. "In fact, I'm prepared to fund a full review of alternative labor techniques." The room changed again. Power had entered. That afternoon, Marisol was escorted, not out of the building, but into another meeting. This time, doctors asked questions. Real ones. How did you know when to apply pressure? Why did you change her position like that? What signs were you reading? Marisol answered slowly, carefully, choosing words that bridged 2 worlds. "I listened," she said. "Not just with my ears. With my hands. With my eyes." Some nodded. Some frowned. Skepticism didn't vanish overnight. But curiosity had replaced fear. Days passed. Then weeks. Marisol was no longer assigned to night cleaning. She was asked to observe. To assist. To explain. A title was created because none existed. Birth Support Consultant. It sounded official enough to make administrators comfortable. But not everyone was happy. A group of doctors filed complaints. Articles circulated about unscientific practices. Online forums debated whether tradition belonged in modern medicine. Marisol felt the tension every time she entered a delivery room. She was still an outsider. Just a visible one now. One night, as she walked past the nursery, she stopped. Behind the glass lay the baby she had helped turn. Peaceful. Breathing easily. Alive. The mother saw her and smiled. "Thank you," she mouthed. Marisol placed her hand against the glass. This was why she had spoken. Not for recognition. Not for approval. But because silence would have been a lie. Change never arrives quietly. It creeps in through cracks, settles into uncomfortable places, and forces people to question things they've built their entire lives around. And when that happens, systems don't adapt at first. They defend. At first, the resistance was subtle. A pause before Marisol was invited into a delivery room. A meeting she wasn't told about. A decision made without her present. Doctors who once asked questions now avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when she entered hallways. Notes were written carefully, cautiously, as if acknowledging her contribution too clearly might validate something they weren't ready to accept. The hospital released a statement. It praised teamwork. It praised technology. It avoided names. Marisol read it twice and felt the familiar ache of invisibility return, this time sharper, because she had briefly tasted what it felt like to be seen. Then the media found the story. It started with a local blog post. Hospital janitor saves baby using ancient technique. The headline spread fast. By morning, it was everywhere. Some called it inspiring. Others called it dangerous. A few called it fake. Television panels debated whether tradition had a place in modern medicine. Comment sections filled with arguments from people who had never stepped inside a delivery room. Marisol didn't read the comments. She didn't need to. She could feel the shift inside the hospital walls. Reporters waited outside. Cameras pointed at entrances. Administrators tightened security. Lawyers grew nervous. One afternoon, Marisol was asked to attend another meeting. This one was different. No billionaire. No gratitude. Just risk management. "We need to be clear," an executive said, hands folded neatly. "Your involvement must be limited." "Limited how?" Marisol asked quietly. "You may observe," another replied. "But hands-on intervention creates liability." Marisol understood the words. She also understood what they meant. They wanted her knowledge, but not her presence. They wanted the benefit, without the disruption. That night, Marisol went home and opened the small wooden box she kept beneath her bed. Inside were old photographs. A worn scarf. A notebook filled with hand-drawn diagrams and notes written in her grandmother's careful script. She traced the ink with her finger. This knowledge had survived colonization. Poverty. Borders. Silence. And now it was being asked to disappear again. The next morning, a difficult labor came in. A young woman. First child. Labor stalled. Pain escalating. A resident hesitated outside the door, glancing down the hall toward Marisol. "Should we call her?" he whispered. The attending physician shook his head. "Not today." The surgery that followed was long. The recovery was harder. Marisol heard about it from a nurse later, who couldn't meet her eyes. That night, Marisol cried for the first time in years. Not loudly. Quietly. The way invisible people do. Days later, the billionaire called. "I've been watching," he said. "And I don't like what I see." Within weeks, funding was announced. A pilot program. A research initiative. Oversight committees. Traditional methods would be studied, not dismissed. Doctors were required to attend workshops. Some came curious. Some came angry. Some came afraid. Marisol stood in front of them, hands shaking slightly. "I am not here to replace you," she said. "I am here to remind you that bodies existed before machines." The room was silent. Slowly, outcomes began to change. Shorter labors. Fewer complications. Less fear. Numbers did what stories couldn't. Resistance weakened. Not because hearts changed, but because results spoke. Still, the cost was heavy. Marisol was scrutinized constantly. Her words recorded. Her actions watched. One mistake would erase everything. One evening, a young doctor stayed behind after training. "My mother labored for 3 days," he said quietly. "They didn't listen to her. She almost died." Marisol nodded. "This matters," he said. "Even if they won't say it yet." Outside, the hospital lights flickered on as night fell. Change was happening. Slowly. Painfully. But it was happening. And Marisol remained standing in the center of it, no longer invisible, but still fighting to be believed. Long before Marisol ever stepped inside a hospital, long before she learned how to disappear into hallways and corners, she belonged to a place where everyone knew her name. Her village sat between dusty roads and open fields, where the air smelled of earth and wood smoke and mornings arrived with the sound of animals waking before people did. Houses were close together, not because space was limited, but because life was shared. In that village, birth was never a private event. It was communal. Women gathered. Older voices guided younger hands. Knowledge moved freely, spoken aloud so it wouldn't be lost. Marisol grew up at her grandmother's side. Abuela wasn't loud. She didn't command attention. She didn't wear authority the way others wore uniforms. People simply trusted her. When Abuela arrived at a home, fear softened. When she spoke, others listened, not because she demanded it, but because experience lived in her words. Marisol watched everything. How her grandmother touched a belly and seemed to understand what was happening beneath the skin. How she listened to breathing, to rhythm, to silence. How she waited when others wanted to act, and acted when others froze. "Birth is not an enemy," Abuela told her once. "Fear makes it one." As a child, Marisol didn't know she was being trained. She thought she was just helping. Holding water. Fetching cloths. Comforting mothers when contractions rose like waves. But Abuela was teaching her how to see. "How do you know when something is wrong?" Marisol asked one night. Abuela smiled. "When the body stops moving forward," she said. "When pain circles instead of flows." Years passed. Marisol grew older. Stronger. More capable. By her teenage years, women asked for her by name. She felt proud, but also afraid. Because the world outside the village was changing. Hospitals arrived. Doctors came and went. Some were kind. Some dismissed everything they didn't understand. And slowly, the old knowledge was labeled backward. Unnecessary. Dangerous. Then came the choice Marisol never wanted to make. Her father became ill. Money ran out. Opportunity disappeared. So Marisol left. She crossed borders that didn't care about her knowledge. She entered cities that valued paperwork over wisdom. She learned new languages and new rules, most of them designed to keep people like her quiet. In her new country, her skills meant nothing. There were licenses she didn't have. Degrees she couldn't afford. Proof she couldn't provide. So she cleaned. At first, she told herself it was temporary. Then temporary became years. She worked during the day. Then nights. She scrubbed floors while doctors discussed cases she could solve in minutes, but never asked to. She learned when to stay silent. Silence kept her safe. She sent money home. She aged quietly. She carried her grandmother's notebook like a secret she wasn't sure she was allowed to keep. And slowly, she began to believe that part of her life was over. Until the scream in the hallway woke it up. Standing now in hospital classrooms, Marisol often thought of Abuela. Of how strange it would seem to see machines everywhere. Screens glowing. Data replacing touch. But she also knew something else. Her grandmother would not have been afraid. She would listen first, Marisol told the doctors. And then decide. Some listened. Others didn't. But Marisol spoke anyway, because silence had almost cost a life. One evening, after a long training session, she walked home alone. She passed a park where children played and mothers watched from benches. One woman rocked a baby gently, humming. Marisol slowed. For the first time since she left her village, she felt whole. Not because she was accepted. But because she was no longer hiding. Her grandmother's voice returned softly. You were never meant to disappear. Marisol looked up at the darkening sky. And she believed it. Years passed. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But steadily, like water wearing down stone. At first, the changes were small. A checkbox added to intake forms asking about comfort positions. A training slide that mentioned body awareness alongside technology. A quiet suggestion to wait instead of rush. Then outcomes followed. Shorter labors. Lower complication rates. Mothers who felt heard instead of handled. Data accumulated. And data, unlike people, was difficult to ignore. The hospital expanded the program. Other hospitals called. Some cautiously. Some skeptically. A few with urgency born from their own failures. Marisol traveled less than she might have. She preferred staying close to where her work had begun. She believed change mattered most where resistance was strongest. Students rotated through her sessions. Some arrived curious. Some arrived doubtful. Some arrived defensive. Marisol welcomed them all. I don't expect you to believe me, she told them. I expect you to listen. She taught them how to watch breath patterns. How to recognize when fear was tightening a body instead of protecting it. How to trust that sometimes the best intervention was patience. One student asked her once, "Do you think this will replace modern medicine?" Marisol smiled gently. "No," she said. "I think it will remind it why it exists." The baby she helped turn grew. A toddler now. Curious. Loud. Healthy. Once a year, the family visited. The mother hugged Marisol tightly every time. "You gave me back my body," she said once. "And my child." Marisol always shook her head. "I just listened," she replied. Late one evening, after the hospital had quieted, Marisol stood alone in a delivery room. She placed her hand on the bed rail. So many stories had unfolded here. So many lives had begun in fear or hope or both. She thought of her grandmother. Of the dirt floors. The candlelight. The whispered instructions. None of it had been written down in textbooks. Yet it had survived. Because someone remembered. Before leaving the room, Marisol adjusted a small plaque near the door. It read, "Care begins with listening." She didn't know who had placed it there. She didn't need to. Outside, night settled gently over the city. Marisol walked down the hallway, not invisible this time, but not seeking attention either. Just present. And that was enough. Do you think hospitals should listen more to experience or textbooks? Comment below. And subscribe for more stories coming up. Thanks.